So you want to start investing in 2022? Awesome, congratulations, you've very likely made a fabulous, life-changing decision. But maybe you are wondering now what's the best way to approach this endeavor. Where should you invest your hard-earned money and what should you be focused on? Well, this video is the right place for you to get started, as I've prepared three extremely valuable tips for you. And so without further ado, let's just jump right into it. All right, hello fellow intelligent investors, my name is René Salmon and let's get started. I have the impression that due to very high inflation rates that we were seeing in 2021 and record low interest rates, more and more people start considering whether they should find an investment vehicle or strategy that protects their money against inflation. Maybe starting to invest your money is simply a resolution for the new year. Or you just no longer want to accept the abysmal interest rates on your typical savings account. Most likely the money in your savings account earns less than 1%, or maybe you even have to accept negative interest rates. I think it's hard to accept those interest rates once you notice that the S&P 500 finished the year 2021 with a gain of 26.9%, or a total return of 28.7% including dividends. Well, whatever your motive, you'll want to be smart about your first investments. And in this video, as I've said, I've got 3 tips for you. And quite frankly, I actually got a 4th one that I'll mention towards the end of the video, and which might actually be the most important one. All right, my first recommendation is to simply get started. Regardless of how old you are today, the best time to start investing was probably a long while ago, ideally 10 or 20 years ago. But it's never too late to get started. And in fact, the second best time to start investing is right now. But why is getting started ASAP so important? Well, let me illustrate this with an example. Let's consider Liam. Liam is 35, he's working in a good job and his employer is paying him a high salary. Let's say he can put away $1,500 a month and Liam decides to invest the money in the stock market, in a low-cost, broad market index fund like the S&P 500, for example. Let's assume he keeps investing the same amount every month for 10 years, until he's 45. And the index fund generated an annualized rate of return of 9%. So in total, after 10 years, he put away $180,000 US. And thanks to the interest earned on his investments, his net worth has actually grown to $290,000 US. Now compare that to Emma. Emma is 30 when she starts investing, and she also invests $1,500 US per month into an S&P 500 index. But as she is younger than Liam when she starts, she has 5 more years until she's 45. So obviously she is saving more over 15 years, $270,000 US in total. But she also earns much more in interest, almost $300,000 US, boosting her net worth at age 45 to approximately $567,000 US. So Emma's net worth is almost twice as high as Liam's net worth at age 45. And that's because she started investing earlier. And maybe this example illustrates the point that getting started is by far the most important decision that you will probably ever make in your investment life. Okay, before we move on, if you get some kind of value out of today's video, I would very much appreciate it if you take the 2 seconds it takes to like the video, maybe even subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date with the content that I post in the future. And of course, a comment goes a very long way as well. Thank you. Okay, my second tip is actually closely connected to the first one. If you want to start investing, you want to play the long game and ignore short-term events. Actually, I often get asked by friends what I think the market will do in the next month or 2, or maybe over the course of the next year. And the only honest answer I can give them is that I have no idea. I have absolutely no clue. And then they always look at me rather confused because they think I'm that investing guy who spends a lot of time on this subject, and I should know for whatever reason. Will the market be higher 3 years from now? I don't know. How will the market react if the tension between China and the US keeps growing? I don't know. If we just look at this chart here, we can see the historical annual returns of the S&P 500. And as you can see, every 4 years or so, there is actually a down year. And sometimes there are 2 consecutive down years. Here's what I do know, however. I do know that these drops or declines are part of the game, part of the investing game. And what I can also say with a fairly high degree of certainty is that at least the US stock market, no matter how much it drops, it will always come back and eventually make new highs sooner or later. We've seen that after the Corona pandemic meltdown in 2020. We've seen that after the great financial crisis, and we will very likely see a similar pattern following future crises. I also do know that everyone should invest, regardless of these temporary crises. The 3 most commonly cited reasons for investing are inflation, which reduces the purchasing power of your money over time, the low interest rates we're experiencing right now, and compounding effects, which I will illustrate right now. Because the third thing I do know is that as human beings, we are struggling to comprehend the true power of compound interest. Sure, there will be down years, absolutely, I can guarantee you that. Years during which the market drops 20% or more. But historically, over the last 100 years or so, the US market has returned around 9 to 10% annually. Now, if you've got the patience to keep investing for a long time, these 9 to 10% annual returns can build true fortunes. Let's just go back to Emma to illustrate that point here. If Emma does not stop investing at age 45, but keeps blowing $1,500 a month into the market and waits another 20 years after age 45, her net worth will not grow to $570,000, which she accumulated after 15 years of investing, but 4.4 million US dollars. That's a massive difference. And as I said, as human beings, for whatever reason, we cannot fathom how compounding multiplies your investments much faster, the longer you are into your investment journey. So if you consider investing your money, don't invest any money that you might possibly need in the short term. You should have an emergency fund for these occasions, but instead plan to invest for a long time. All right, let's focus on my third tip. I think especially when you are just starting out, you should not be obsessively focused on the annual rate of return that you can achieve with your investments. From my experience, a lot of new investors in particular, they are attracted to rather speculative investments like cryptocurrencies or NFTs. And there are actually big YouTube channels feeding into this. But being attracted to those assets is just the result of your inner greed and most likely just a distraction. So don't focus on where you can achieve the highest return possible. And instead, I think your savings rate is by far the most important variable that will determine how quickly you will be able to accumulate wealth. You can achieve a Warren Buffett style, compounded annual growth rate of 20% for many years. But if your savings rate is only, say, 3%, will very likely not become very wealthy. If on the other hand, you can achieve a savings rate of 40, 50 or 60% of your take-home pay, or maybe even more, a 5 or 6% annual return will very likely be more than sufficient to become financially independent over time. And again, let me illustrate this point with Emma one more time. In our prior example, we assumed a monthly investment of $1,500 US. Let's say her take-home pay is $3,000, so that's a savings rate of 50%. We assumed an annualized return of 9%, and after 15 years, she ended up with $570,000 US. Let's assume she only saves 3% of her take-home pay, so that's $90 a month. But for some reason, Emma is an investing prodigy, and she generates 20% annually over the next 15 years. Again, that's the kind of return that Warren Buffett has achieved. While her investing skills are almost worthless, as she only ends up with around $100,000 US after this 15-year period. That's a $470,000 difference to the 9% return combined with a very high savings rate. The more your net worth grows, the more you can shift your focus on the annual returns you can achieve. But especially in your first few years, I would recommend being obsessively focused on your savings rate, and you can pretty much ignore your compounded annual growth rate, because your savings rate is actually something you can control. And generally in life, you want to be focused on the things that are within your control. And in a way, I think this also highlights why almost everyone in investing, probably 90 to 95% of the people or so, should just stick to passive, low-cost index funds. And in a way, this is a perfect transition to my fourth tip, which might be the most important one of all the ones I mentioned in the video. What is also within your control is your asset allocation. For starters, an asset class is a grouping of investments that exhibit similar characteristics and are subject to the same laws and regulations. And the term asset allocation describes how much of your capital or net worth you allocate to different asset classes. Some of the most commonly cited asset classes are fixed income instruments like corporate bonds, which are basically loans taken out by a company, but instead of going to a bank, a company borrows the money from investors, who then in return for their capital get a regular interest payment. Other well-known asset classes include real estate, stocks, which are sometimes also referred to as equities, gold, cryptocurrencies, art, and of course, cash is also an asset class. Now, without getting into too much detail here, choosing what percentage you want to allocate to those different asset classes might very well be the most important decision you will ever make in your investing career. Your asset allocation will largely be determined by two factors. First, your personal goals, and secondly, your investment horizon. And generally speaking, if you have a long-term investment horizon, want to invest your money for many years or maybe even decades, and want to build wealth, so not just preserve wealth, well, then you absolutely want to invest or want to be invested in the asset classes that consistently deliver the highest returns. And assuming you want to invest without the use of leverage, without the use of debt, then there's no doubt about the fact that the best asset class to be invested in are stocks. As I highlighted earlier, over the past 100 years, on average, US stocks have generated nominal returns of 9 to 10% annually and real returns, so that means adjusted for inflation, of around 6 to 7% annually. And that's it. As always, may your finances and investments prosper. Good luck.